Frankfurt Airport, April 14th, 1989. A Libyan operative steps into Pan Am first class with forged diplomatic papers and the calm of a man who believes he's untouchable. But the real danger isn't on the tarmac or in the skies. It's already seated beside him. In 2A, a stranger in a tailored suit orders vintage scotch, talks Texas oil deals, and laughs at the right moments. 8 hours later, as the cabin tightens for descent and the landing time locks in, 16:42 hours JFK. One small, businesslike gesture turns the jetway into a crime scene that looks like fate. This is Operation First Class. Michael Brennan wasn't born into espionage. He was recruited into it during his 3rd year at Georgetown, where a professor noticed something useful. Brennan could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room without ever revealing what he actually thought. By 1976, that skill had been weaponized. The CIA turned him into a specialist in elicitation, the art of extracting information from people who don't realize they're being interviewed. His training involved living under false identities for months at a time, maintaining elaborate cover stories about oil consulting, import-export businesses, even academic research. Every detail mattered. How you ordered coffee, which newspapers you read, whether you checked your watch during conversations. A single inconsistency could end a career or a life. By 1989, Brennan had spent 13 years building and discarding identities. He'd operated in Beirut, Damascus, and East Berlin. He spoke passable Arabic and fluent German. Associates described him as unremarkable in the best possible way. Neither too friendly nor too cold. The kind of person who blended into business class lounges and diplomatic receptions without leaving a memorable impression. This quality made him strategically invaluable. In an era when most intelligence work involved either technical collection or violent action, Brennan represented a third path. Manipulation so subtle the target never knew they'd been compromised. His assignment file contained one personal item that wasn't operational necessity. In his wallet, behind his Legends business cards and credit cards, he kept a photograph of David Kellerman, a case officer who'd been killed in Ankara in 1983. Kellerman had hesitated during an exfiltration, second-guessing his approach for less than 15 seconds. That hesitation cost him his life and nearly compromised an entire network. Brennan carried the photo not as memorial, but as reminder. In operational environments, thinking is fatal. You train until action becomes reflex, then you trust the reflex. The target represented a different kind of danger entirely. Ahmed al-Senussi wasn't a soldier or an ideologue. Intelligence services classified him as a coordinator, the infrastructure that made terrorism possible. He moved money through European banking systems, arranged safe houses across 6 countries, and maintained networks of forged documents that could transform identities overnight. His operational security was exceptional. He rarely stayed in one location more than 48 hours, used multiple passports, and avoided direct communication with field operatives. Most importantly, he almost never entered United States airspace, which made him feel invulnerable to American reach. According to intercepted communications from February 1989, al-Senussi discussed his daughter's upcoming wedding with a contact in Tripoli. She was 12 years old, and he spoke about saving money for her future. Analysts flagged nothing operationally relevant in the conversation. But it revealed something else. Al-Senussi believed he had a future to plan for. When the operation succeeded, that wedding fund would be distributed to relatives who'd never understand why he died in a New York jetway, instead of walking her down an aisle in Benghazi. The CIA's assessment was straightforward. Al-Senussi's coordination activities had been linked to 3 attacks on European targets, and one attempted bombing of a U.S. military transport. His networks were growing more sophisticated, and intelligence suggested he was planning operations on American soil. Arrest was politically impossible. His Libyan diplomatic credentials, though forged, would trigger international complications. Extradition would require evidence that crossed legal thresholds the intelligence community couldn't meet without compromising sources. A visible elimination would risk retaliation against U.S. interests and create a martyr for recruitment propaganda. What planners needed was something that looked like nothing. The strategy had a name: Natural Consequence Protocol. The logic was straightforward. If a target dies from apparent natural causes in a public space with no obvious foul play, the diplomatic and operational fallout collapses to zero. No trials, no hostages, no retaliatory strikes. The subject simply stops being a problem, and the world moves on. The obstacles made the operation nearly impossible to execute. First, location. First-class cabins are controlled environments with limited personnel, clear sight lines, and passengers who notice disruptions. Any visible confrontation would trigger immediate response from crew and passengers. Second, identity. Al-Senussi traveled under diplomatic cover, meaning any operation that revealed his true purpose would expose the intelligence that identified him. Third, timing. The window existed only during transit. Once he reached New York and connected with his ground network, surveillance became exponentially harder, and the operational footprint expanded beyond manageable parameters. Despite these challenges, planners identified an opportunity. In March 1989, Signals Intelligence intercepted Al-Senussi's flight reservation. Frankfurt to JFK, April 14th. Pan Am Flight 103, first class. The booking was made through a European travel agency with no apparent connection to intelligence services. For the first time in 18 months of tracking, Al-Senussi's location and timeline were predictable. More importantly, the environment, a transatlantic flight, provided something operationally unique. 8 hours of forced proximity in a space where social interaction was expected, even encouraged. The authorization came through CIA Deputy Director of Operations on March 28th. The directive's classification level was handle via talent keyhole only, restricting access to fewer than 12 individuals. The operational timeline was compressed. 15 days to build cover, position assets, and prepare execution protocols. Within 72 hours, Michael Brennan received his final briefing in a windowless room at Langley. During that briefing, Brennan experienced what agency psychologists call legend drift. He'd been living as Michael Brennan, oil consultant, for 3 weeks by that point, immersing himself in the identity's background. He found himself thinking about the fictional wife his legend included, wondering what she looked like, whether she'd approve of his choices. For approximately 40 seconds, the constructed identity felt more real than his actual history. In the post-operation psychological assessment, evaluators noted this as evidence of preparation depth rather than instability. But the mission continued, and so did Brennan's commitment to seeing it through to completion. By April 10th, all elements were in position. But first, one critical element needed resolution: getting Brennan into Seat 2A, directly adjacent to Al-Senussi's confirmed Seat 2B. The infrastructure began with documents that could survive hostile scrutiny. Brennan's legend: Michael Brennan, petroleum investment consultant based in Houston, required depth that went beyond surface details. The agency's documents division created a complete corporate history for Brennan Petroleum Advisory Services, including registration papers filed with Texas Secretary of State in 1984. a business bank account with a 5-year transaction history showing consulting fees and travel expenses, and a professional website that had existed since 1987. The business cards used 22-point thermographic printing on ivory stock, the kind of subtle quality marker that wealthy travelers recognize instinctively. Technical support provided a compact device codenamed Clicker. Operational specifications remained classified, but deployment parameters were documented. The device required direct skin contact, operated through pressure-activated mechanism, and produced effects that manifested between 12 and 18 minutes after application. The device was designed to resemble a common medical item, specifically an insulin delivery system. Passengers and crew trained to avoid staring at medical equipment, making Clicker functionally invisible in social contexts. The device measured 8.4 centimeters in length and could be concealed in a standard suit jacket pocket without creating visible outline. Communication protocols operated on a need-to-know architecture. Brennan's handler, designated Blackjack, maintained position in Frankfurt, but had no direct contact after boarding. A backup support team tracked the flight's progress through standard civilian aviation channels. Each operative knew only their specific function to prevent compromise scenarios. If Al-Sanusi's security detected anything unusual, no single capture point could unravel the entire operation. Escape routes existed but were minimal. By design, this operation's success depended on never needing them. The seat assignment challenge required solving without drawing attention. Pan Am's first-class section on Frankfurt, New York routes used 2-2 configuration, 2 seats on each side of a single aisle. Al-Sanusi's travel agent had booked 2B, aisle seat on the port side. The agency needed 2A, the window seat beside him, to remain available until Brennan's booking and then ensure no reassignment. The solution involved 3 carefully timed interventions across a 2-week period. First, a corporate travel account with Pan Am made a reservation for 2A, then canceled 72 hours before departure, releasing the seat. Second, Brennan's Legends company booked 2A through a different channel, creating no obvious connection. Third, a technical specialist ensured no yield management algorithm would automatically reassign seats during the 36 hours before departure. The planning consumed 12 days. By April 13th, Michael Brennan had memorized 83 biographical details about his Legends background, including the names of fictional college roommates, his character's father's military service record, and opinions on Texas property tax policy. Brennan had 18 hours before boarding, April 14th, 1989. At 0630 hours, Brennan arrived at Frankfurt Airport's Terminal A. He checked in using his Legends passport and American Express corporate card, both of which produced no irregularities in Pan Am's system. His single carry-on bag contained items consistent with his cover. Wall Street Journal International Edition, a bound presentation document labeled Libyan Petroleum Investment Opportunities, and business casual clothing for a 3-day New York trip. Every item was selected to support conversation, not just inspection. At 0815 hours, Al-Sanusi arrived separately. Surveillance Team Cardinal confirmed identity through telephoto observation from an airport cafe. Al-Sanusi moved with confidence that suggested genuine diplomatic status rather than nervousness of someone using forged papers. He carried European designer luggage and wore a tailored suit that balanced Arab and Western styling, expensive enough to signal status, conservative enough to avoid attention. His forged Libyan diplomatic passport produced exactly the response planners anticipated. Brief examination, polite deference, expedited processing. Over the next 90 minutes, both men moved through separate channels toward the same gate. Brennan positioned himself in the business class lounge, visible but not conspicuous, reading financial newspapers and checking his watch periodically, the behavior pattern of someone with schedule pressures. Al-Sanusi made phone calls from a bank of public telephones, speaking Arabic in low tones. Surveillance couldn't capture content, but noted duration. 7 minutes, suggesting operational check-in rather than personal conversation. At 10:45 hours, boarding began. First-class passengers entered through dedicated jet bridge. Brennan boarded in the second wave of first-class passengers, neither first nor last. Timing mattered. Arriving too early meant extended waiting. Too late meant reduced opportunity for natural interaction. He found 2A, stowed his bag in the overhead compartment, and settled into the window seat. The leather was cream-colored, already worn into comfort by thousands of previous passengers. He ordered scotch from the flight attendant, Macallan and neat, and opened his Wall Street Journal. Al-Sanusi boarded 6 minutes later. He located 2B and paused, making the brief eye contact that airplane etiquette required when claiming an adjacent seat. Brennan nodded, smiled slightly, and returned to his newspaper. Not friendly, not cold, forgettable. Al-Sanusi settled in, arranged his items, and accepted champagne from the attendant. The cabin began filling with remaining passengers. Departure time, 11:45 hours. What Al-Sanusi didn't know was that every element of Brennan's presentation had been designed to trigger specific psychological responses. The Wall Street Journal signaled business credibility. The Scotch choice suggested refined, but not excessive spending. Someone comfortable with luxury, but not wasteful. The bound presentation document in the seat pocket, with Libyan petroleum visible on the spine, was bait left where curious eyes might naturally fall. The aircraft pushed back at 11:52 hours, 7 minutes behind schedule. The safety demonstration played. Flight attendants moved through standard procedures. As the aircraft taxied toward runway 27 left, Brennan closed his newspaper and glanced at Al-Sanusi's reading material, an Arabic-language business magazine. Brennan spoke casually, the way strangers in first class sometimes do when trapped together for hours. Doing business in the Middle East? Al-Sanusi looked up. His expression showed calculation, then courtesy. Attempting to. European markets are complicated. Texas oil sector is looking east, Brennan said. Libyan reserves specifically. Political complications, but the numbers work if you can. Navigate the relationships. The hook was set. Al-Sanusi's posture shifted microscopically, from defensive privacy to interested engagement. Over the next 40 minutes, as the aircraft climbed to cruising altitude over the Atlantic, Brennan deployed the most powerful intelligence tool available. Flattery disguised as professional respect. He asked questions about Libyan petroleum infrastructure. He listened more than he spoke. He laughed half a beat after Al-Sanusi made observations, the timing that suggests someone deciding it's safe to relax rather than someone performing agreement. 2 scotch pours into the flight. Al-Sanusi was talking about opportunities that his position in Libyan government circles might facilitate. He wasn't boasting overtly. Operational security still functioned, but fragments emerged. References to coordination challenges in European markets. Mentions of logistics networks that could expedite complicated transactions. Brennan mirrored his pacing, matched his drink order, and never pressed too hard on any specific detail. The complication hit 3 hours into the flight. A passenger in seat 3A across the aisle, a German businessman returning from Singapore, began attempting to join the conversation. He'd overheard petroleum discussion and wanted to share opinions about North Sea drilling operations. Brennan adapted by shifting from questions to stories, turning the conversation into a monologue about Texas wildcatting history that al-Sanusi couldn't resist. The German businessman eventually lost interest and returned to his magazine. The cabin's attention narrowed again. Meal service complete, trays cleared, overhead lights dimmed for the mid-Atlantic stretch where passengers typically sleep or work quietly. By 14:30 hours, Brennan had achieved something operationally crucial. Al-Sanusi viewed him as ally rather than stranger. Not a friend, that would have raised suspicion, but a business contact worth maintaining. Someone useful, someone safe. The psychological groundwork was complete. What remained was execution mechanics and timing. Descent began at 15:45 hours. The cabin voice announced preparations for landing at John F. Kennedy International Airport, arrival time approximately 16:42 hours. Passengers began the familiar rituals: closing laptops, organizing documents, checking watches. Brennan noticed al-Sanusi doing the same, his shoulders relaxing slightly as the flight neared conclusion. The most dangerous part of travel, the vulnerable transit, was almost over. At 16:32 hours, Brennan stopped talking. He let silence do the work. People notice silence less than motion. He glanced at his watch, then at the presentation document he'd been pretending to review intermittently throughout the flight. Al-Sanusi was reading final pages of his magazine, the distracted reading of someone running out the clock. At 16:38 hours, Brennan created a natural reason for proximity. He leaned slightly toward al-Sanusi, gesturing toward the window. "First time you've seen Manhattan from the air?" Al-Sanusi leaned closer to look past Brennan through the window. The skyline was becoming visible through scattered clouds. The moment was perfectly businesslike. Two travelers sharing a view, and perfectly intimate. Brennan's left hand reached into his jacket pocket, while al-Sanusi's attention focused on the window. The movement was casual, the kind of fidgeting passengers do when preparing for landing. The device required 3.2 seconds of contact. Brennan achieved it through a gesture that appeared to steady himself during mild turbulence, his hand briefly touching al-Sanusi's arm just above the wrist. The contact point was exposed skin between cuff and watch band. Al-Sanusi didn't flinch. The pressure was light, the context appropriate, the duration forgettable. At 16:42 hours, wheels touched runway 4 right at Kennedy. The cabin exhaled collectively, passengers already mentally transitioning from travel mode to arrival mode. Seatbelts remained fastened. The aircraft taxied toward the gate, the slow crawl through airport infrastructure that makes the final minutes feel longer than the flight itself. Al-Sanusi checked his watch, verified his passport was accessible, and began planning his path from seat to jetway to customs. The tradecraft wasn't strength or speed. It was social invisibility, using the moment when everyone is focused on deplaning logistics, overhead bins, and the narrow aisle traffic pattern. The vulnerability exploited was what first class sells as luxury, privacy and public, the assumption that space and service create safety. The aircraft reached Gate 12 at 16:54 hours. The jetway connected. First-class passengers stood in the practiced chaos of overhead bins opening, bags descending, the shuffle toward the exit. Brennan collected his belongings and moved toward the aisle, letting al-Sanusi step out first. The courtesy of window seat to aisle seat. They walked together down the jetway. Two businessmen concluding an accidental flight friendship with the mutual understanding they'd probably never see each other again. What happened next occurred in the transition space between aircraft door and terminal, in the jetway's narrow corridor where airport architecture creates temporary privacy. Al-Sanusi's physiological response began approximately 14 minutes after contact. consistent with Clicker's documented operational parameters. The effect presented as sudden onset cardiovascular incident, rapid heart arrhythmia, triggering consciousness loss. Brennan was 3 meters ahead when he heard the sound of a body collapsing. He turned, along with several other passengers. Al-Sanusi was down, unconscious, blocking the jetway. Brennan's response was immediate and appropriate. He called for medical assistance, stepped aside to allow room for help, and provided no information beyond, "He collapsed suddenly." Flight attendants arrived within seconds, trained for medical emergencies. Airport paramedics were summoned. The crowd of deplaning passengers compressed around the incident, then was redirected down an alternate path. Brennan continued through customs with his legend intact. His documents passed inspection. His checked luggage, which didn't exist, consistent with a short business trip, raised no questions. He exited Kennedy International at 17:32 hours and took a taxi to a Midtown hotel reservation that had been made by his Legends company 2 weeks earlier. Behind him, emergency response protocols followed their standard sequence: paramedics, ambulance transport, emergency room assessment. By 18:15 hours, Port Authority medical staff understood that a male passenger, approximately 45 years old, had experienced fatal cardiac arrest in the jetway of Pan Am Flight 103. Initial assessment indicated no suspicious circumstances. The deceased had shown no signs of distress during flight, according to crew interviews. No struggle or confrontation occurred. No visible injuries were present. The official response formed quickly because it was convenient. International travel, middle-aged male, stress factors, and pre-existing cardiovascular condition created a narrative that required no investigation beyond standard medical examination. The body was transferred to New York City Medical Examiner's Office for routine autopsy, as required for deaths in airport jurisdiction. The examination, conducted the following morning, identified cardiac arrhythmia as cause of death. Toxicology screens detected no common poisons, no alcohol beyond minimal levels, no recreational substances. The conclusion reflected medical reality. Hearts stop, sometimes without warning, particularly under travel stress in middle-aged men with genetic predispositions. The death certificate listed natural causes. No criminal investigation was opened. The Libyan mission in New York was notified through diplomatic channels. Al-Sanusi's body was repatriated within 1 week. Privately, intelligence channels illuminated with traffic. CIA headquarters received confirmation through back-channel communication that Blackjack forwarded at 1900 hours, April 14th. Package delivered successfully. Courier departed clean. No complications. The National Security Council received sanitized briefing within 24 hours. State Department's Intelligence and Research Bureau noted the development for regional analysis purposes, but maintained no official knowledge of operational details. The strategic assessment calculated success across multiple dimensions. Tactically, Ahmed al-Sanusi was removed from operational capacity permanently. Intelligence analysts estimated his coordination network would require between 9 and 14 months to reconstitute leadership and re-establish operational rhythms. 3 planned operations in European theater were disrupted or postponed due to his absence. Meetings scheduled for New York didn't happen. Financing channels he controlled remained frozen, while Libyan intelligence services determined succession. Strategically, the operation achieved its primary goal: deniability. No diplomatic protest emerged because no proof existed beyond unverifiable suspicion. Libya's government couldn't claim assassination without acknowledging al-Sanusi's actual role, which would contradict their diplomatic cover story. The operation's success taught a dangerous lesson visible to everyone monitoring these events. If elimination can occur in first class surrounded by witnesses without leaving prosecutable evidence, then location provides no protection and conventional security measures become obsolete. The costs manifested in spaces that don't appear in official assessments. Michael Brennan couldn't discuss the operation. He couldn't process it through normal psychological channels. His success remained sealed in a file with classification restrictions that would outlive him. The agency's psychological evaluation documented no trauma indicators, which was itself noteworthy. The ability to compartmentalize this completely suggested either exceptional operational discipline or concerning dissociation. Brennan returned to his actual identity, resumed other assignments, and never spoke al-Sanusi's name again outside classified environments. For al-Sanusi's family, the narrative they received was medical misfortune. His daughter, the 12-year-old whose wedding he discussed saving for, received condolences, but no explanation that would satisfy the questions children ask when parents die suddenly. The money he'd been saving transferred to relatives who distributed it according to family custom, never understanding that the man who should have walked her down an aisle had been killed by a government whose existence he'd threatened. The operation revealed practical reality about modern intelligence work. Clean violence, elimination that appears natural, removes legal, diplomatic, and moral constraints that public operations face. When killing looks like fate, retaliation becomes impossible because the actor remains officially invisible. This capability was simultaneously the operation's greatest success and its most troubling implication. The moral calculation splits observers into opposing camps. One perspective argues this was prevention, removing a logistics coordinator before his networks facilitated attacks that would have killed civilians. Al-Sanusi's role in previous operations suggested future violence was planned, not hypothetical. Arrest was impossible, extradition was fantasy, and surveillance indefinitely consumed resources without preventing action. By this logic, one death prevented dozens or hundreds, and the method's discretion prevented retaliatory escalation. The Oster calculation was cold but defensible. Minimized total harm through precise action. The opposing perspective argues this was execution without trial. State power disguising murder as medical event and calling the result justice. Al-Sanusi received no defense, no examination of evidence, no opportunity to contest allegations. The same intelligence agencies that concluded he warranted elimination have documented histories of being wrong, of targeting individuals based on incomplete information or geopolitical convenience. By this logic, any government claiming authority to kill its perceived enemies in foreign airports without oversight or accountability creates precedent that erodes the foundations of international law. The cleaner the operation appears, the easier it becomes to repeat, and the less scrutiny each subsequent decision receives. The paradox is that both perspectives contain factual truth. Al-Sanusi almost certainly coordinated logistics for terrorist operations. The CIA almost certainly prevented future attacks by removing him. And the operation almost certainly violated legal and ethical boundaries that exist specifically to prevent governments from wielding unilateral death authority. The question isn't whether the facts support one view, they support both simultaneously. The question is, which principle takes precedence? Security or legitimacy? What's your take on this operation? If a target is genuinely guilty of coordinating terrorism but legally untouchable due to diplomatic complications, is a silent assassination more moral than a public arrest that risks hostage situations, international incidents, and potential escape? Or is state power to eliminate enemies without trial exactly the kind of authority that should terrify citizens most? The answer reveals whether you prioritize outcomes or process, security or rights, pragmatism or principle. Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you reconsider the gap between intelligence operations and the rules they claim to follow, hit that like button and share this with someone who thinks they know where the line should be drawn. Operation First Class proves the line exists wherever power decides to place it. And that's precisely what makes it either necessary or unforgivable, depending on whether you're the one protected or the one eliminated.